There's always a lag in this. So bear with me, fam. What's up, friends? It's me, your boy Max Mogren, reporting live for you here on Facebook. This is Wake Up Wyoming. It is April 9th, 2020. You have to bear with me today. I got a cut on the inside of my cheek. It seems my wisdom tooth is growing. And, never got the wisdom teeth removed. It's growing. It's got a sharp edge, and it's like I sleep on it wrong, and it starts cutting up my inside of my cheek there. So bear with me today. I got some good news for y'all. Give me a like, give me a share. Let me know where you're coming from. Right now, Be Live showing 0 viewers. Start a watch party if you be so kind. Here we're showing unemployment, and we're also showing the gosh, why is it doing that? Hold on one sec. Technical difficulties. There we go. Starting off today, we got some good news. Let me know if you're out there. I don't see any viewers yet. Oh, what's up, Marsha Jennings? Thanks for tuning in. Arizona in the house. What's up, Jackie Dag? Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Big show today, as you see in the title there. Good news. Not unexpected news if you've been paying attention here at Wake Up Wyoming. The predictions for coronavirus deaths are shifting. Here's why. This is brand new from CNN. Again, we can't trust CNN. We can't trust government agencies. We can't trust the medical insurance pharmaceutical mafia. But even the folks who, looking back at March 13th, 2020, the New Yorker magazine Intelligencer was saying the worst case coronavirus model, 214 million Americans affected, 1.7 million dead. Well, those statistics have been significantly downgraded over recent months. Now they're estimating 60,415 deaths. The main model used by the White House and pretty much everyone else was updated Wednesday to show far fewer projected U.S. deaths from COVID-19, down to 60,415 people by August from the 82,000 the model showed on Tuesday, which was already lower than previous projections. Yeah. When they were fear porning us up to get this state of medical martial law declared, they were saying 1.7. I also saw 2.4, but 1.7 million American deaths due to COVID-19. Bad news, though. New data on the pandemic's trajectory from the United States around the world hasn't fed into the model almost every day, driving the changes. And the downward adjustment suggests that social distancing may be working better than expected in some places. The pain may last until August. The updated model assumes social distancing measures, including the closure of schools and businesses, will remain in place until August. But other measures could replace those, as I reports, including mass screening, contact tracing, and selective quarantines. So never let a good crisis go to waste, they say. Interestingly, my opinion, again, I've been studying this in the last couple of shows. I'm just showing you how these official statistics, the statistics we see all over here on the Johns Hopkins Doom map, cannot really be trusted. Hopefully you've seen that. Johns Hopkins, the same folks who partnered with old Billy Gates, the unelected billionaire globalist technocrat vaccinator in chief, partnered with these guys back in October 2019 to bring us the Event 201 pandemic exercise, where they were looking at how the world could respond to a coronavirus outbreak. Conveniently, these numbers keep dropping back. Interestingly, let's look at an actual pandemic. I got a book here today. I'm going to read you an excerpt from The Pessimist's Guide to History. And it's funny, I found this the other day on the bookshelf, flipped it open to a random page, and I found the 1918-1919 influenza epidemic. So I'm going to read you a little excerpt from this book. Got this from my buddy Bart. His dad had it in a toolbox in the truck. Good book to have in the toolbox if the truck breaks down in the middle of nowhere and you're stranded. Read through other people's misfortunes throughout history to make your own lot in life seem a little less severe. But let's read this. 1918-1919 influenza epidemic. And I got an article up here from Health and Human Services, National Institutes of Health, to In the spring of 1918, a new virulent type of flu appeared in the Army training camps at Fort Riley and Camp Funston in Kansas. Over 1,100 men suddenly became ill. That strikes me as odd. And 46 died in the first known cases of this flu strain. They were far from the last, and within a year, the new strain, called Spanish flu, even though it originated at Army training camps in Kansas, would claim more than 22 million lives worldwide. See, that's a real pandemic. Though it is possible the flu pandemic broke out in several places simultaneously, American troops appear to have played a major part in the early stages of its spread. Soldiers in Kansas who had not yet been stricken by the disease were transported to the European front that spring and probably carried the virus with them. The disease swept through American forces stationed in France during the last months of World War I. By the fall of 1918, every major army fighting in Europe had a significant number of their fighting forces bedridden with the disease. It continued to spread like wildfire throughout Europe as trains and ships helped transport the disease into previously uninfected areas. American President Woodrow Wilson, British Prime Minister David Lloyd George, and French Premier Georges Clemenceau were all ill with the flu while negotiating the Treaty of Versailles. The United States reported only mild cases of the disease until the fall of 1918, when the epidemic reached its height. Then influenza, complicated by pneumonia, claimed lives on a scale never before seen in the United States. And local and state governments desperately tried to get the epidemic under control. Schools were closed in Boston and Washington, D.C. in an attempt to halt the contagion, and the New York Public Library even stopped circulating books. In New York City, the health commissioner urged people to kiss only through a handkerchief, and 500 people were arrested for spitting. San Francisco made the wearing of face masks mandatory, though none of these measures slowed the progress of the epidemic. The flu outbreaks in Army training camps were so serious that the government called off the October draft. During the last weekend in October, the killer virus claimed more than 21,000 lives in the United States, then the highest 7-day death toll in U.S. history. The hallmark of the disease, popularly called the Spanish flu, was its swiftness. In a South African mine, a lift operator was seized with a sweating paralysis so quickly that he lost control of the machine. 24 miners plunged to their deaths at the bottom of the shaft. In Washington, D.C., a young woman called the authorities to report that 2 of her roommates were dead, another ill, and that she alone remained untouched by the disease. By the time the authorities reached the apartment a short while later, all 4 young women were dead. Unchecked, the virus spread across the globe, even wiping out entire Eskimo settlements. More than 450,000 lives were lost to it in Russia, 375,000 in Italy, and 228,000 in Great Britain. In India, where poverty and overpopulation made the virus spread much more quickly, 5 million died. More than 550,000 Americans died of the disease, more than 10 times the American losses in every battle during all of World War I. So there we see a real epidemic, 550,000 American lives lost. Interestingly, at the time, 1/4 of the American population had clinically recognizable cases of flu during the epidemic. 550,000 Americans, that confirms the figure we saw there, deemed conservative. The estimated population of the U.S. on the 1st of July, 1918 was some 103 million. Let's do some quick math here. Go for my Google calculator. I like the Google calculator. Sorry. Thanks for bearing with me. Not the most tech-savvy cat on the planet, although we do all right. So 550,000 divided by, what was the total population of the U.S.? 103 million estimated. 103,000 million. So times 100, 0.5% of the U.S. population at the time died from the Spanish flu, called the Spanish flu. Interestingly, so 0.5%. Interesting little side note in history here. Again, the epidemic, the flu, emerged out of some U.S. military bases in Kansas, where if you read between the lines, of course, if you do a Google search for this, it's going to say it's BS, but you read it between the lines, it sounds like there was some biological warfare testing and some experimental vaccination going on at those military bases. But who knows what you can believe. But it's important to note the Spanish attribution of the epidemic, common in the literature, is thought to be a result of the fact that the press in neutral Spain was not censored during World War I, and therefore some early printed reports of the flu originated from Spain. The epidemic began in spring 1918, and much of its impact was experienced during that calendar year, but the epidemic also persisted into 1919. So it didn't originate in Spain. They called it Spanish flu because the Spanish reported on it first because their media wasn't censored. But the point is, at the time, 0.5%. Now, the official statistics in the U.S., they're saying that 60,415 total U.S. deaths is the projected death toll. And right now, we got 331 million Americans. Looks good. Times 100. So, according to the official projections coming from the government, we're looking at 0.018% of Americans projected to die due to COVID from this ongoing pandemic. To put that into perspective, 60,000 total deaths forecast. If we look over at the CDC provisional death counts from COVID-19, we can see right here data as of April 8th, 2020, looking back at February, March, and the first week of April, the total deaths from all causes in the United States in that period, and this is incomplete, so the total number is going to be higher. You can see down here, these numbers are incomplete. Only 36% of expected deaths reported. Total deaths from all causes in the last 2 months, give or take, almost 500,000 people, 490,389, according to these CDC statistics. Again, they're incomplete, but 3,307 confirmed COVID-19 deaths so far. Again, these are incomplete. We see a lot of widely varied statistics out there, but it's important to note, if you look at what I highlighted down there, deaths with confirmed or presumed COVID-19. So this includes people that didn't even have a test for COVID. So there's your pandemic, America. Interestingly, this is one thing I've been covering lately: general immune boosting measures to help us stay away from expensive hospitals so we don't overwhelm the healthcare system, healthcare cartel, and we don't get overwhelmed by absurdly costly bills ourselves. Let's all make an effort to stay healthy these days. Stay hydrated, get adequate rest, don't stress, don't smoke, healthy diet and exercise, limit exposure to unnatural EMF, shut down those Wi-Fi, smartphones, etc. Stay warm and dry, especially your feet. Vitamin supplements, good ones to hit up. ACD3, might as well get a little more C in there, ACDC. And zinc, time-tested herbal remedies, garlic, ginger, echinacea. You can go online and find all sorts of herbal remedies. Hit them up. Nasal rinsing, aka the neti pot. There are some approved treatments out there, although interestingly, this chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine was given emergency approval by the FDA. Now, published 2 days ago, the CDC is removing its unusual guidance to doctors about the drug favored by Donnie Trumpo. So we'll see what happens there, but these drugs were given emergency approval. This guy, Dr. Vladimir Zev Zelenko's protocol, there it is. I'm not giving medical advice. I am just reposting things I found on the internet. Okay, supplemental oxygen tanks, CPAP machines can be used in the comfort and privacy of your own home at considerably less cost than a mechanical ventilator in a hospital. Some folks are using high doses of intravenous vitamin C, remdesivir, the experimental drug, Avajan, aka favipiravir, a Japanese antiviral drug patented by Fujifilm Corporation. And it's important to note the ICU ventilation. You know, we've been told that we need to shut down the economy so we don't overwhelm healthcare. And they're talking about personal protection equipment like gloves and masks, which I find it utterly absurd that our healthcare system that profits literally billions of dollars every year didn't have enough personal protection equipment stockpiled to keep its workers safe from even the initial couple of weeks of a pandemic. But these ventilator machines, we're being told we need all sorts of ventilators, more ventilators. Let's get those ventilators going. Bear in mind, these ventilators cost between $5,000 and $10,000 per day. If you're putting the ICU in the USA, these statistics, I got these. Again, this is old. This is from 2005, but the daily cost of an intensive care unit, contribution of mechanical ventilation, daily costs were greatest in intensive care on mechanical ventilation. Day one, $10,794. Day two, $4,996. Okay, these ventilators are really expensive. Fortunately, this doctor out of Mississippi published 2 days ago at USA Today. It's not fancy, but it works. Mississippi doctor uses garden hose, lamp timer, and electronic valve to create makeshift ventilators. Okay, we're told that we need these, $15,000, $20,000 machines. We need to make a whole bunch of them. And this doctor down in Mississippi, God bless him, has created them. Created the absolute simplest ventilator that they can build with parts available in any city for less than $100. Can be assembled in approximately 20 to 30 minutes, meaning a dedicated team of 4 to 5 people could produce nearly 100 of these $100 ventilators in a day if needed. So that's good news. But also interesting to report here with this ventilator situation. This was published yesterday by USA Today. A bridge between life and death. Most COVID-19 patients put on ventilators will not survive. While governors, mayors, and hospital officials conduct much publicized life and death struggles to acquire ventilators for most COVID-19 patients, the oxygen providing apparatus will merely serve as a bridge from life to death. I would add a very expensive bridge from life to death. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo recently estimated that only 20% of coronavirus patients placed on ventilators will ever come off. Dennis Carroll, who led the U.S. Agency for International Development's infectious disease unit for more than a decade, told USA Today perhaps 1/3 of COVID patients on ventilators survive. But for many, ventilators represent their last chance. If you were one of the 1/3, I suspect you'd be very appreciative that capability was available, Carroll said. Ventilators won't fix the ailments that put patients on them, but they can provide support until other treatments work or the patient's body overcomes the disease. And physicians are determined to use the tool in the last-ditch effort to keep patients alive. Some patients may be on a ventilator for only a few hours or days. But experts say COVID-19 patients often remain on the ventilators for 10 days or more. Longer duration of intubation is often related to worsening acute respiratory distress syndrome, ARDS. And patients who have issues with kidneys and other organs in addition to lungs stay intubated for longer periods of time. Okay? So if somebody, if there's somewhere around a 20 to 30% chance someone's going to survive if you put them on a ventilator, who knows what that rate would be without the ventilator. People being put on ventilators for 10 days or more, just basically keeping them alive as long as possible and sucking every dime possible out of them before they expire. That's my cynical view of the medical insurance pharmaceutical complex. What's your opinion? I'd love to hear it. Again, can't stress it enough. Home oxygen therapy costs, this is again old, 2006, but home oxygen therapy, according to the study, the average cost per patient per month for home oxygen therapy is $201.20, considerably less than these ventilators. Just want to put that out there. We're looking at links today from the indomitable rice farmer. He is keeping me real busy trying to stay on top of things. Look at all these links. This is all one day's work. News links, April 9th, 2020. Ricefarmer.blogspot.com. Good thing I didn't read and decide to share all these because I would have never got a show going. You can see up there I got a lot of tabs open because there is a lot of news out there today. But if you're looking for news, you don't want my BS, my opinions. My opinions, take me with a grain of salt. I'm just one man sharing his perspective on the world. You can head on over to Rice Farmer. These are all well-documented, mainstream, so-called reputable sources. And this is a day's worth of work for the indomitable rice farmer. Just keeps going and going. Great article from Caitlin Johnstone. If you don't follow her, I would highly recommend it. This was published on April 7th, 2 days ago. Prepare to have your worldview obliterated. Talking about how governments love to take advantage of crises. What better example to lead off with than the terrorist attacks, the inside job, false flag, coordinated terrorist attacks of 9/11, the controlled demolition of World Trade Centers 1, 2, and 7, the missile flown into the Pentagon. What happened? We got the Patriot Act. The first draft of the civil rights eroding U.S. Patriot Act was magically introduced 1 week after the 9/11 attacks. Legislators later admitted that they hadn't even had time to read through the hundreds of pages of the history-shaping bill before passing it the next month. Yet somehow its authors were able to gather all the necessary information and write the whole entire thing in a week. This was because most of the work had already been done. CNET reported the following back in 2008. Months before the Oklahoma City bombing took place, then Senator Joe Biden, running for president, the Democratic nominee apparently, sorry burners, introduced another bill called the Omnibus Counterterrorism Act of 1995. It previewed the 2001 Patriot Act by allowing secret evidence to be used in prosecutions, expanding the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act and wiretap laws, creating a new federal crime of terrorism that could be invoked based on political beliefs, permitting the U.S. military to be used in civilian law enforcement, and allowing permanent detention of non-U.S. citizens without judicial review. The Center for National Security Studies said the bill would erode constitutional and statutory due process protections and would authorize the Justice Department to pick and choose crimes to investigate and prosecute based on political beliefs and associations. Back in 1995, Biden's bill was never put up to a vote. But after 9/11, then Attorney General John Ashcroft reportedly credited his bill, Biden's bill, presidential nominee Biden, with the foundations of the USA Patriot Act. Civil libertarians were opposed to it, Biden said in 2002 of his bill. Right after 1994, and you can ask the Attorney General this because I got a call when he introduced the Patriot Act. He said, Joe, I'm introducing the act basically as you wrote it in 1994. I point this out because it is now more important than ever to be aware that power structures and their goons like Biden can and will seize on opportunities to roll out pre-existing authoritarian agendas. We know it happened after 9/11, and we may be absolutely certain that it is happening now. Commentator and satirist C.J. Hopkins has a long ongoing thread on Twitter right now, compiling dozens and dozens of creepy Orwellian steps that have been taken by governments around the world and by Silicon Valley tech giants in response to the virus over the last 3 weeks. I emphasize how long the thread is because if you think you've finished scrolling through it, you probably haven't. Make sure you keep clicking more replies until you get to the current entries. I strongly encourage everyone to stroll through the thread when you get a chance to get a sense of the scale and scope of the drastic measures that are being implemented around the world and maybe bookmark it and keep checking back now and then for updates. The entire thread is comprised of mainstream media articles with excerpts. Some entries are more jarring than others, but taken as a whole, it becomes clear that we're looking at a whole lot of power being handed over to the kinds of institutions that historically don't do good things when giving a lot more power. And these are just the steps we know about. To what extent are these drastic, intrusive, authoritarian measures justified? The answer, in my estimation, isn't clear yet. There are too many unknowns about the virus, too many unknowns about the responses to it, and too many unknowns about exactly what is going on behind the veil of secrecy in opaque government agencies around the world. There's an argument expert epidemiologists are making that there's no time to get perfectly certain of these things before dealing with a pandemic, that speed is of the essence, and hesitating due to fear or maybe getting something cast wrong can cost millions of lives. Maybe it's true. I'm not an epidemiologist and I do not know. What I do know is that enormous changes are happening, and the powerful people are definitely conspiring to advance their own interests as this unfolds. There are many theories about who specifically is conspiring with whom and the specific manner in which they are doing so, and they're being dismissed by establishment loyalists as conspiracy theories, of course, as though that in and of itself constitutes some sort of argument, right? That conspiracies are happening is actually just a fact that is obvious to any adult with a mature understanding of the world. And it can be useful to come up with theories about how that might be occurring. Calling theories about conspiracies the thing that they are in a disparaging tone does not actually invalidate them. Amen. Goes on and on. Good read. I'll finish it off. Not too much more. There are a ton of theories about what's going on behind the scenes with this pandemic and the policies that are being put in place to respond to it. Some are smart and relatively well-founded. Some are stupid and rooted in generalized paranoia or partisan idiocy. Many contradict each other, and many could potentially fit together in some way. I personally haven't seen enough evidence for any one theory to throw my weight behind it, but I'm watching carefully, and I'm glad that the hive mind is chewing on this riddle. Me too, Caitlin, me too. One thing I will put my weight behind right now is the prediction that those of us who are dedicated to truth are going to have to drastically revise our worldviews in the coming months. There are such large-scale shifts happening in such an unclear information environment that the only thing we should expect is the unexpected. This virus is shaking things up and being used to shake things up in ways we don't really understand yet. And even before the virus, the world's dominant power structures were acting very weird. This means our ideas about what's going on in the world will likely have to undergo some revising in the relatively near future. The bigger the revelations, the more revision will be necessary. Right now, that's the primary piece of advice I have to offer. Stay skeptical, stay intellectually honest, and keep your perspectives malleable. If we are more interested in the truth than we are in being proven right or in feeling smug, then we are likely on a collision course with future revelations that will change our ideas about how the world is functioning in some pretty significant ways. If this doesn't sound possible to you, it's only because you currently lack the humility, intellectual honesty, and cognitive flexibility to understand that you may not be seeing the full picture yet. Things are shifting. All we can do is keep our minds agile enough to shift with them. Prepare to have your own worldview obliterated. Thank you, Caitlin. If you go there, this Consent Factory is the Twitter page she links to for that CJ Hopkins guy's list of new measures being implemented. So check it out, CJ Hopkins. Pretty wild. So that's worth checking out. One example. The UK plans to issue coronavirus immunity passports so people can leave the lockdown early. How will those passports be issued? Well, I would imagine there'd be some high-tech digital nonsense, surveillance state nonsense implemented to keep you safe from COVID. Published yesterday at Mint News, George or Google's dystopian crisis tracking could be straight out of George Orwell's 1984. Google's move is merely the latest in a long line linking big tech companies ever more closely with the government and the security state. Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders suspends his presidential bill, published yesterday at 10:30 a.m. over there at ABC. It looks like all those burners, just like Ron Paul got screwed by the Republican Party back in 2012, just like Bernie got screwed in 2016. Bernie got screwed again. Biden's got the nomination. Sorry, burners, You put all your hope in a Messiah, whether you think it's Bernie Sanders or Donald Trump or whoever. But the bottom line is the whole system is pretty corrupt. Looking at this local issue, if you like many other towns and mayors, or not towns, like other towns, counties, states, governments all over the world, here in up north, I should say, I'm in Alpine, Wyoming, but up in Jackson Hole, Teton County, Wyoming, the town council, in the midst of all this, they passed all these laws making it illegal for people to go about their lives, shutting down businesses, laying off thousands of people. And the town council and mayor just voted to raise their pay. They justified saying, well, these pay raises won't be in effect until after the next election, so we're not actually doing it to ourselves. Yeah, there they are, town council. Interestingly, they're not paid very well already. But basically, they're giving themselves a 31% pay raise. I know a lot of these people personally. I know Pete Muldoon. I've worked with him in various capacities for more than a decade. He's a pretty nice guy, but he also is one of those folks who does not really embrace open-minded critical analysis. In my opinion, he's largely media illiterate. And from the perspective, well, here, I'll read you this. I put a comment on this post. In March, I tagged Mayor Muldoon in a post suggesting that elected officials should forego their salaries as a sign of solidarity with the millions of workers nationwide their draconian policies have laid off. Muldoon's response was to block me on Facebook. This is not the first time I've seen him run from cognitive dissonance. In the last few years, he's taken the mental shortcut of labeling anyone he disagrees with as a conspiracy theorist. Ever wonder why the rich keep getting richer with zero effort while the working class falls further behind? Conspiracy theorist. What is money really all about? Conspiracy theorist. Why is healthcare so expensive? Conspiracy theorist. Why are people so sickly? Conspiracy theorist. How does the intentional weather modification factor into climate change? That's an issue I brought up with Pete many times. Well, he's called me a conspiracy theorist. And of course, anybody critically analyzing COVID in Wyoming, they're a greedy, elderly hating conspiracy theorists. We need elected officials open-minded enough to examine their own BS and the BS coming out of the mega corporation controlled hysteria peddling mass media. It seems our elected officials are mostly media illiterate and can't comprehend the possibility that the billionaire technocrats who control mainstream media and social media algorithms might use their power to push an agenda from time to time, if not all the time. These kooks, kind of rude there, maybe I shouldn't have called them kooks, but I did. These kooks can't fathom conspiracy, even when they're taking advantage of medical martial law to push through their own pay raises. See, useful idiots. Only one like there. Hopefully more people see that comment over there. Shared it. Pretty wild. I thought this was funny. A buddy of mine shared this on Facebook in reference to all governments. And then the Lord said, "Go forth, my children, establish government throughout the land. Use its threats of force and violence to rule over your neighbors. Kill others who have different flags. Steal the fruits of labor from your neighbors and give it to those who covet. This is the way," right? the Sermon on the Mount flipped on its head by modern governments. Interestingly, published to Yahoo News, the LA Times, April 7th, good example of your government in action. Hospitals say the feds are seizing masks and other coronavirus supplies without a word. Hospital and clinic officials in 7 states described the seizures in interviews over the past week. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, is not publicly reporting the acquisitions despite the outlay of millions of dollars of taxpayer money, nor has the administration detailed how it decides which supplies to seize and where to reroute them. Officials who've had materials seized also say they've received no guidance from the government about how or if they will get access to the supplies they ordered. That has stoked concerns about how public funds are being spent and whether the Trump administration is fairly distributing scarce medical supplies. Goes on and on. At the same time, government seizing personal protection equipment from hospitals. You know, we saw Trump had passed this 5G Act in late March. Now, 3 days ago over at space.com, Trump just signed an executive order to support moon mining and tapping into asteroid resources. The U.S. sees a clear path to the use of moon and asteroid resources. Your tax dollars at work, friends. Your tax dollars at work. Thought this was funny too. These guys, well, not funny. Sad. You see these guys, these old dogs here with IDs tattooed on their forearms, concentration camp survivors. If you give enough of your autonomy and power to your government, you can probably get free tattoos at some point. In the world today, it might look a little bit more like a microchip. Some would say the mark of the beast. Published on April 7th over at Yahoo News, Trump threatens withholding funds from the UN World Health Organization. See what happens there. Don't trust any of them. At least I don't. What's your opinion? Interestingly, fairness and accuracy in reporting reported yesterday as the U.S. consigns Iranian to death. Corporate media look the other way. This is in reference to sanctions. This is a great in-depth piece here. You know, people, we're in the midst of this so-called pandemic, and the United States is still waging economic warfare all over the planet. Similar article from Counterpunch, published yesterday, amid plague, sanctions are genocide. Strong words, but it proves fairly true. Sanctions have long been indefensible, now in the time of COVID-19 more than ever. Nor are they some minor phenomenon. Over a quarter of humanity lives under U.S. economic sanctions. That means millions of people lack untroubled access to food and medicines during a lethal pestilence. Thus, in Iran, where the government fears millions of deaths from COVID-19, sanctions amount to genocide. Compelling argument. Stands to reason. Of course, good news, as we covered early on here in the broadcast, they just downgraded the projections for deaths from, well, they've downgraded it from 1.7 million Americans down to approximately 60,145 Americans. Let's see. Yep. No, 60,415. Excuse me. Of course, those are just projections. As we've seen, it's hard to trust the official statistics coming from known liars in the mainstream media, known liars in the government, known liars in the United Nations World Health Organization, and known liars in the pseudoscientific military insurance pharmaceutical complex. The U.S. is expected to block an IMF loan to help Iran fight the virus from the Agence France Presse, April 8th, 2020. No surprise there. What else have we got? Linda Tripp, central figure in the Clinton impeachment, died at 70. They didn't blame her death on coronavirus. Word has it she had cancer. Linda Tripp, not familiar with her. There she is with Monica back in the 90s when Billy Crack Clinton, if you want to know why Billy Crack Clinton has the nickname Billy Crack Clinton, you should do a little history. Look into how when Billy Crack Clinton was the governor of Arkansas, he was smuggling billions of dollars worth of cocaine into the government, helping the CIA out. Coronavirus disease 2019. Interestingly, here, just looking at the stats real quick. Okay, there's a couple different CDC websites dealing with coronavirus. According to this updated April 8th, 2020, 395,011 cases of COVID, 12,754 total deaths from COVID in the U.S. Again, I can't stress this enough. Data includes both confirmed and presumptive positive cases for COVID-19 reported to CDC. So you don't need a positive test result of COVID in order to have COVID listed as your cause of death, or even to have COVID listed as your cause of illness, right? Now, these statistics, it's hard to understand where they get these numbers from. These closely mirror what we're seeing on the Johns Hopkins Global Doom map. If we click US, Johns Hopkins higher figures than the CDC. Of course, those figures from yesterday. I've covered it in previous shows. This map seems largely to be a joke. Lots of very interesting sources of data here. And again, I can't stress it enough, this map includes presumed positive cases. Confirmed cases includes presumptive positive cases. Again, I've covered some of these data sources they're using. I have no clue how they're considering DXY 1.3 acres, worldometers.info, and BNO to be respectable sources of data. Also, they're getting info from local media reports. So can't really trust those statistics. The one statistics that do seem rather trustworthy are the provisional death counts based on death certificate data received and coded by the National Center for Health Statistics. These statistics are current as of April 8th, 2020. Important to note the death counts are delayed and may differ from other published sources. So again, this is not complete data. But so far, as of April 8th, 2020, listing 3,370 or 3,307 total COVID deaths in the last 2 months, out of 490,000 total reported deaths from all causes in the United States. Let's do a quick little calculation on that. 3,307 divided by 490,389 times 100. So of all the deaths in the United States over the last 2 months, 2 months and a week, 0.67% have been coded as COVID deaths, and that includes confirmed and presumptive COVID cases. Interestingly, if we look at deaths from all causes in the United States, percent of expected deaths, that's based off of previous year's data. There's nobody's above what we would assume to see as far as deaths, except for one notable exception, New York City. New York City reporting 128% of normal expected deaths for the last 2 months. But if you look at the rest of the country, New York State is right at 100. Nobody else, no other state has got has had more deaths than expected in the last 2 months. So factor that in as good news. Good news about COVID, bad news about how trustworthy our official government agencies are in the media. Important to know when we're talking about all this COVID, this is from Wired Magazine, published on the 6th. The Asian countries that beat COVID-19 have to do it again. Okay, we've seen all these countries, they show us how they've flattened the curve by implementing draconian measures, assuming we can trust the statistics coming from these countries. Singapore, Hong Kong, South Korea, and Taiwan have flattened the curve. Then travelers from the US and Europe began re-importing the virus. Okay, it's important to note that no matter how long we shut down the planet, no matter how long we shut down the economy, no matter how much we flatten the curve, whether that's due to these draconian laws or perhaps seasonable variability in viral transmission and the seriousness of viral infections, a lot less people get the flu, a lot less people get the cold in the summertime than in the wintertime. Why? Seasonal variability in viral transmission. So regardless of whether or not we beat this, people are still going to catch the COVID. It's still going to be a thing. And all the social distancing in the world is not going to change that. Interestingly, published April 6th, Sweden may have found the right solution to the coronavirus. Unlike other countries, it has so far avoided both isolation and economic ruin. Sweden letting businesses stay open, letting schools stay open, not passing crazy laws, not making it so people can't live their normal lives. We'll have to wait and see, because the same magazine, nationalreview.com, says it's still too early to declare Sweden a success story. So we'll see what happens, but keep an eye on Sweden, because Sweden, I'm Swedish. My last name, Mogren. Swedes would say I'm Mogren. Sensible people, in my opinion. Short dicks, long memories, as the joke goes. And we'll see how Sweden fares in the midst of all this, because unlike the vast majority of other countries, they are not eliminating freedom. They are not taking dictatorial powers over the people and using coronavirus as an excuse to do so. I thought this was kind of fun. Friends shared this online. The same people who say Trump is giving medical advice act like Bill Nye is a scientist, pretend Al Gore was a credible scientist for climate change, act like Bill Gates is a doctor, and say a 16-year-old is a climate expert. Weird. It is weird. Let's focus specifically on Billy Gates there. I covered it the other day on the show. It's important to note Bill Gates on the coronavirus epidemic. He's openly admitting here. I'll let this play so you can hear it. He says, I work in this area. Here's what we're doing. Talks about how we're having to change the economy. And shockingly, he says, until you're widely vaccinated, not until we are widely vaccinated, as Bill Gates put it, until you are widely vaccinated, mass gatherings may not come back at all. He also mentions how schools can be reopened with decreased risk, which implies remote online learning for children. How's that going to affect kids in the long run? I don't know, but let's listen to this real quick. Sorry if the audio quality is kind of crummy. That's just the way it is.
Down to low levels. As much as you looked at the potential of a pandemic occurring, is there anything that's really surprised you about what's happened in the case of the coronavirus?
I thought we would respond a bit faster. Even for me, who works in this area, though, the idea of what we're doing, how we're having to change the economy here in order to drop the number of cases, it's really unprecedented.
Sure is.
And we're kind of in uncharted territory about how we minimize the pain. Even the issue of once you get the case numbers down, there's a lot of dialogue between our foundation experts and the government now, but what does opening up look like? Which activities like schools, have such benefit and can be done in a way that the risk of transmission is very low.
Yeah.
And which activities like mass gatherings may be, in a certain sense, more optional. And so until you're widely vaccinated, those may not come back at all.
So how long do you think this is going to last?
Well, I believe that
you get the idea. If you watch this video, it's 27 minutes long. It's painful for me to watch, because the whole thing is Billy Gates talking about how we need to widely vaccinate people against the coronavirus. Interestingly, if you heard there, Bill said schools can be opened with decreased risk, which I would assume means remote online learning. Interestingly, published at betanews.com 4 days ago, American schools are banning Zoom and switching to Microsoft Teams. Microsoft Teams, obviously, Billy Gates founded Microsoft. Strikes me as a bit odd. I've caught a lot of flack from folks for sharing this image. People say I'm Q-tarded. They say I'm a Trump-tard because this whole blame President Trump thing is in here. But there's Bill, old Bill, the vaccinator, the man who has openly admitted to wanting to depopulate the planet, saying that vaccines and other medicines are one of the ways to get to negative population growth on the planet. And I thought this is interesting. I find this interesting. Phase 1, fear, the coronavirus. Phase 2, control information and censorship. This is all well documented at the Event 201. If you go to Event 201 and look at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, John Hopkins, Medical, John Hopkins Medical, and World Economic Forum recommendations, they say we need to control the narrative. That fits pretty well with phase 2. Phase 3, shutdown and social distancing. Well, that's definitely happening. 4, people were upset that that people took offense to this. I don't know why. Blame President Trump. I'm not saying I'm a Trump supporter, but what I am saying is, in my opinion, Donald Trump is a fall guy for the establishment. There's been so much hatred put towards this one person, when in reality, the entire system is corrupt, right? Donald Trump is not the cause of our problems. He is a symptom of the problems. Number 5, martial law and checkpoints. We're seeing that every day. And number 666, mandatory vaccination rollout. Disturbing business. I don't know why I had this one up. That weird pain in your nuts and the limits of telemedicine. Telemedicine is a thing now. Makes more sense than taking all the sick people and having them go to one building where the doctors are, but there are limitations to it. And we got Michelangelo's David's dick on there, keeping it PG for y'all. But telemedicine has arrived, and as we just saw there, teleeducation has also arrived. How is that going to impact the children? That's a question I ask myself. Jeff Bezos, named the richest person in the world 30 in a row, while Amazon workers protest warehouse conditions. It's important to note, Bill Gates there, globalist, technocrat, arguably a depopulationist, multi-billionaire, right? So-called richest, one of the richest people in the world, is profiting handsomely. He's positioned himself to make a whole lot of money off of this pandemic that he arguably helped orchestrate, pandemic that he shockingly predicted only 5.5 months before it really hit home here in the U.S. Jeff Bezos, another rich guy, profiting handsomely. Why? Because they're closed down a lot of stores right here locally. The only things that are open are like the grocery store and the hardware store. Literally hundreds of small businesses shut down. Here in Star Valley, up in Jackson, same thing. Hundreds of local businesses shut down. Amazon.com still delivering with impunity. As 10 million Americans file for unemployment and the economy crumbles as the coronavirus ravages the country, one aspect of American life has proven unshakable: the absolutely staggering wealth of Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos. For the 3rd year in a row, Mr. Bezos has earned the top spot in Forbes' list of billionaires. Despite his $40 billion divorce, a contributing factor to the $18 billion drop in his net worth last year, bringing him down to a paltry $113 billion, Mr. Bezos is still the man on top. Okay, it's important to note Jeff Bezos is not actually the wealthiest man on the planet. Okay, Jeff Bezos has only been running a wildly successful global online store for about 22 years, since the late 90s. Amazon.com started off as a bookstore. Now they sell just about everything. But there are other people, there are other families that have controlled the global financial system for hundreds of years. These are the shareholders in institutions like the Federal Reserve Bank that have got way more money than Jeff Bezos. Important to note, though, small business being driven out of existence while the Bezos of the world are profiting handsomely. Interestingly, Amazon still selling. I thought this was interesting. Amazon's shifting definition of what is essential. And this goes in depth. I'll paste this one in if you want to read it. I'm winding down a little. My wisdom tooth. Oh, it hurts to talk. It hurts to talk today. I have this wisdom tooth that's growing. It's really sharp and it's digging into the side of my cheek. Got to figure out what to do with it. But check that one out if you feel so inclined. What else have we got here in the news links? No big surprises here. Global trade will plunge by up to a third in 2020. So says the World Trade Organization, published 22 hours ago at Digital Journal. Coronavirus fallout, 1/3 of Americans missed rent payments in April. So says Sarah Paintner at Yahoo Finance, published yesterday. ABC News telling us, so this, as it says in the headline there, the social, economic, and political fallout from this extended shutdown of basic human life on the planet, the state of medical martial law, is going to impact so many people in ways that can't be, calculated, in my opinion. Published 2 days ago, ABC News, calls to U.S. helpline jump 891% as the White House is warned of mental health crisis, right? How many people are going to suffer? How many people are going to die? How many lives are going to be derailed and messed up by this situation? Quite a few. Again, as it says in the headline today, death projections downgraded to 60,415. Millions of Americans and billions of people all over the world being drastically impacted by this. Coming from theconversation.com, America is drinking its way through the coronavirus crisis. That means more health woes ahead. No doubt about that. Lay off the sauce, friends. Pulp friction, border jams, delay, supply of toilet paper is only ingredient, paper pulp. Interestingly, still can't get toilet paper here. I was able to get a roll or get a 4-pack of rolls at the grocery store a couple of weeks ago, but still not on the shelves here. It's kind of wild. Everything else is readily available, but no toilet paper. And coming from the Hill, the Pope says the coronavirus outbreak may be one of nature's responses to climate change. The Pope Francis suggested the outbreak of the novel coronavirus may be one of nature's responses to people around the world ignoring the harsh consequences of climate change. Yeah, if we're going to talk about climate change, it is impossible to talk about climate change in a truly scientific manner without admitting to, acknowledging, and incorporating data about how intentional weather modification has been affecting Earth's weather and thus Earth's climate for the last 70, 80 years. This is not a conspiracy theorist. This is a well-documented historical fact. Head on over to Jim Lee and Dominique Marama's incredible website, Weather Modification History. You can check out the timeline there. But I really like, being a mainstream news hound that I am, I really like going over here and, I love old books. I love old newspapers. I love old National Geographics, even though it's all propaganda to a large extent. But I love going over here and scrolling through this archive where they have literally hundreds of mainstream news articles documenting the development of weather modification technologies and the weaponization of these technologies throughout previous decades. And it's wild, a long time ago in the mainstream media, there was talk about how we needed to be really mindful of this situation. We needed to be really careful that these technologies were not used to create a technocratic oligarchy controlling the world's weather and thus controlling the entire planet. For example, The Salamanca Republican Press, July 1st, 1954. Weather control might play a part in future war. Okay. The Pope's an idiot. Religion, especially the Catholic Church, has been a system of thought and mind control. It has been a form of government for hundreds of years, thousands of years. And now we live in this world where arguably the most dangerous weapons out there, biological, chemical warfare, weather warfare, electromagnetic warfare, none of these things is talked about. But if you go back in time, 1959, weather control seen as the ultimate weapon. Again, I catch flack. The local mayor here that just granted a 31% pay raise for himself. I've gone to meetings he's had talking about climate change, and he says conspiracy theories will not be tolerated here. Well, it ain't a conspiracy theory, bud. It's called the historical record. You're so out of touch with reality that you can't even acknowledge things that were in the mainstream press 70 years ago. Keep scrolling here. You can find all this information. Interestingly, after decades and decades of the mainstream media cautiously applauding man's advances in weather control, man's advances in climate control, in recent decades, there's been a significant drop-off in mainstream coverage on the topic, and now people have been falsely led to believe that weather modification does not work. When all the way back in the mid-1960s, the U.S. military was caught covertly using weather modification as a weapon during the Vietnam War, Operation Popeye. Senator Claiborne Pell, big thanks to you for blowing the whistle on that back in the day, because the weather has been weaponized for decades. Australia, all these major newspapers talking about how the weather was used to. Weather was weaponized. The weather is still weaponized. Okay. Can't stress it enough. Again, big thanks to Jim Lee, Dominique Marama, two real bona fide heroes on the planet today. I've had both of them on the show in previous times. But again, I can't stress it enough. You go back here and look, and you can see in recent years, they pretend that, well, it's kind of wild. They pretend in recent decades, they pretend that weather modification does not work. But at the same time, we're told that somehow geoengineering is going to be used to save us all from climate change. Climate change is an agenda, my friends. Any pseudoscientific debate on climate change that doesn't acknowledge the wild and wacky history of humans manipulating the weather and thus the climate is woefully inadequate. Just like any debate about a so-called pandemic, the coronavirus situation, that doesn't give us real, actual, factual statistics is not scientific. Let's keep it scientific, friends. On that note, I'm signing off. You've heard enough about you've heard enough of my rambling for a day. Again, thanks for bearing with me. Got this horrible pain in my mouth right now. I'm gonna go get outside and enjoy a beautiful day. No signs of the aerial spray up there today. Hope you all have a lovely day too. Thank you all for tuning in. We got 41 viewers still after all that. Appreciate all y'all. Remember, it is possible to voluntarily abide by social distancing protocols while simultaneously expressing grave concern about dystopian government regulations. This whole situation, let's check. Well, I like this one a lot. I don't like it, but it's very revealing. We'll leave it on that. The U.S. weekly initial jobless claims last week, 10 times the previous record of 600-some thousand new jobless claims. 6 million last week. What does it all mean? How's it all going to play out? I don't know, but I do know it's all up to us to keep waking up, keep looking up, keep taking care of ourselves and the ones we love. Remember, the mainstream media is specifically designed by the corporate technocrat oligarchs who control it to distract us. That's why 99% of what you see in the media is nonsense. Deceive us. That's why the vast majority of the news you see is biased and misleading. Distract us, deceive us, divide us. That's why it separates us into these absurd groups: rich versus poor, black versus white, pro-life versus pro-choice. Absurd classifications. Conservative versus liberal. It's all nonsense. It's all mind control designed to keep you fighting your neighbor and not joining forces to take down the psychopaths that are ruining this planet. The mainstream media designed to depress us. That's why the news focuses on so much pessimistic crap all the time. What can we do? Stay positive. Dive in there and get the information you need, but don't let it get you down, right? It is designed to depress us. Don't let it. I'm signing off for now. I love y'all. Have a great day. Take care. One love. And of course, peace.